Does SKIL's 40-volt 18-inch chainsaw really have the power to make the cut? This is the SKIL CS1800-15, and it's an 18-inch chainsaw running on their 40-volt platform. Now this is meant to be a DIY saw or a homeowner saw. It's not meant to be for the professional. You don't see a lot of, double bar studs and some of the other pro features on this saw. However, what it does have is a great value. Now let's dive in, take a closer look at these features. Of course we're going to use it, can you tell? And then we'll come back and talk about pricing. Actually, we talk about pricing already in just a moment, and we'll talk about warranty also. We've got the SKIL CS1800-15, and basically it's their 40-volt power core 18-inch chainsaw. Now it runs an 18-inch bar and chain, obviously, that's why it's an 18-inch chainsaw. And the specific blade is a 3/8 low profile, or LP, 050 gauge chain. Now it's a 62 link, so you should be able to purchase based off of that 3/8 050 62 link chain. Should get your replacement for that, as well as the 18-inch bar. Looks like a pretty standard bar, and we do have an oiler on here as well. So we have an oil tank here, and it's self-oiling. Now we'll talk about actually maintenance in just one moment. Performance on this is supposed to be 21 meters per second, which is a pretty fast chain speed for what would be considered a DIY chainsaw. So getting into the 18-inch, you're getting into actually cutting some decent sized material, and we'll check and see how fast it cuts, regardless of what the actual chain speed is. We get a kickback brake right here, so this is your manual chain brake that you should always engage. And what happens here is when it's in the off position, which is here, which allows this chain to move. By the way, I have the battery out of this, it's not in it, but with your second hand here, if it does have a kickback, it kicks up and your hand will automatically push that brake. At the same time, you should always engage this brake when you're not using it. And I say this especially on electric chainsaws or battery-powered chainsaws, because gas-powered chainsaws, you hear them sitting there idling, and so you have that sense of caution because the motor's running. With a battery-powered chainsaw, you don't have that. Basically, you pick this up, you engage the throttle, and it's off to the races. So if that brake is not engaged, that chain is going to spin when you pull the throttle. Now, talking about that, there is a safety button right here. So you can't just grab the throttle and pull it. You have to actually push the safety button in, and then you can pull the throttle, and then you don't have to keep your hand on that as long as the throttle's pressed. But release the throttle, and that safety button comes back out, and you have to press it once again. Here's where the battery will actually install. And again, here is the oil tank that will actually fill up here in just one moment. Now also right here on the front of the saw, the front of the body of the saw, we have some metal bucking spikes. It's interesting because they also have the plastic ones right here too. A lot of your battery powered saws, that's what you'll see, are these plastic spikes. When you get into that 16 and 18 inch, I really like to see some metal bucking spikes where you can literally use those for leverage. So when you're cutting on a log and you need to have a little bit of leverage, or let the saw kind of bite in and put less work on your arms and more work on using that leverage for you, it's nice to have those metal bucking spikes. Now I will say a couple of the most notable features on this saw is the fact that you get it as a kit. In other words, you get the saw and the charger and the 6 amp hour 40-volt battery, and all that's included for $299. Now we usually don't talk about pricing till the end, but I think that's one of the notable features of this package is the all-in $300, and you got a 6 amp hour 40-volt battery as well as the charger. So I think that's a really good deal, especially when you're looking at a DIY, somebody, a homeowner that's needing to cut limbs, cut logs. Here in Florida, we're starting to get into storm season. That June through October is hurricane season. So having a chainsaw around, and one that can cut some decent sized limbs, is a big plus. And a battery powered saw is great because you're not having to store oil and gas and worry about carburetors, things like that. Now you do need oil for the blade, especially for this one, self-oiler, so you definitely need some oil in the tank for that. And I'd recommend draining that because it is going to leak out. All chainsaws do it. Now let's take a closer look here at the tensioning system. And it's a toolless tensioning system, so you don't have to have any tools. It's not a 13 millimeter or 9/16 or 5/8 or 11/16. No bar nuts here, just this little turn handle here. And basically, if you turn this, you just kind of loosen it up, and now you can loosen the tension on the chain. So you can see now we've got, the chain is very loose. I can loosen that up some more. And now you see a real big gap there in the chain. Now if I want to tighten that up, I can go the other way with this. And again, as long as this is loose, it'll let that bar move. And what you want is right here in the middle of the bar, is you want it tight enough to when you pull down with some decent pressure, that you can barely see the top of those teeth under there. And I'd say that's maybe a little more. And then clamp that down. And now you should be ready to go. Now on a brand new chain, brand new saw, that chain is actually going to stretch rather quickly. So your first couple of cuts, you may want to set the tension again, and then after that it should remain pretty well. But always on a new chain, on a new saw, you're going to get some chain stretch right away out of the gate. Now let's go ahead and take this off and take a look under the hood. And I'll release the chain brake here. Again, we have the battery out of this. And pull this off, and you will see, since this is a toolless type of tensioning system, everything's included right here in this cover, which if you're looking for, you know, kind of a professional saw, this is not going to cut it. But for that DIYer, it's going to be absolutely fine. You got a little ring and pinion in here that when I turn this, it moves that pin. And then what that pin is doing is actually moving this blade. So that pin is resting in either, it's probably the bottom pin right here, and it's moving this in and out. And the other hole is actually the oiling system. So you see this little rubber O-ring here in that slot? That's where we're actually getting our oil from. And then that oil is going in this top hole, and this chain is running that oil all around the bar to keep everything lubricated. Now, one thing I highly recommend is every couple of times that you use this chainsaw, flip the blade over. It does not matter that the writing is upside down on this bar. You want that to be the case every now and then. So keep rotating this bar, and that will keep things wearing in a kind of a unilateral or an equal form, because you don't want just one side wearing on this, and that's what will happen. And it will keep performing well if you keep flipping it over, because this hole then becomes the hole for the pin to sit in, and the upper hole we'll use for the oiler. So those are basically the exact same. And so this blade or this bar is meant to flip over and over. Also, I highly recommend you to learn how to sharpen your chain as well. That will save you a lot of money by not having to replace your chain every time it gets dull. Now let's get some oil in this and use it. And you'll see that we have a translucent oil tank, which is handy, because once we get it in here, then we flip it over, we can actually see the level of the oil there in the tank. So definitely make sure that you always have oil in there. You're going to burn through chains quickly, and it's not going to cut very well. Okay, a couple of things here. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this log. 9.5 inches. Yeah, I'd call that 9.5 inches in diameter. It might get a little wider down there at the bottom, but I think this is a good test subject for this 18-inch chainsaw. Now, yes, the 18-inch will cut a lot larger than this, but at the same time, this is probably the typical large side of what most DIYers or homeowners are going to be cutting after storm damage, stuff like that. You may be felling some trees, but at the same time, this is not the saw if you're felling trees all the time. A couple of things, we do have our battery in, and we do have a full battery, And when you first use the saw, you've got oil in it, but the first thing you want to do is get it lubricated. And the way you do this is literally just pull the trigger. I'm going to show you here on this limb, we should see like an oil line start to form. Okay, now we're starting to see a little bit of oil there. So there you definitely see a distinct oil line. And you see that I had to run that several seconds, I don't know, 20 seconds, 20, 30 seconds to actually get that oil all the way around that blade and actually slinging off. Now that may be a little overkill, but now I know that I've got oil all around that blade if it's actually slinging off. Okay, let's make our first cut. Pretty instant on the trigger pull. Maybe just a quarter-second delay. And about a second and a half for full speed. 1001. Yeah, about a second and a half to get to full speed. And there's what I'm talking about those bucking spikes. So you see I kind of laid the blade in and then I let this bucking spike bite right there, and now I can use the leverage. Nice straight cut. Cutting rather well. Okay, so I buried it till it stopped on purpose just to see how much pressure I had to apply. And I would say with moderate pressure I can stop the saw, but with just adding some pressure to where it's cutting well, it still has the power to go. And I'm curious, there's a lot of battery powered saws, when you start it in the wood, it doesn't have the power to start. Let's see. Yeah. So no problem to actually start in the wood. Okay, let's see if we can actually plunge cut this. Okay, took a little bit, but it did it. No cutouts. And right now, we still got 3 out of 4 bars. Okay, I pulled out our battery. And I've made probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 cuts. And you'll see how loose that blade is, like I was telling you. So I'm going to loosen that up. And then we'll tighten it. Okay, looks like we finally reached the end. Now let's count up our chips. Okay, looks like we finally reached the end. Now let's count up our chips. So all in all, we made 33 cuts through that wood, and I'm going to give it 34 because I did the plunge cut, and I also cut off kind of this little cap or growth on the side of it as well. So I'm going to give it 34 cuts on a single 6 amp hour battery. Now, if you were just cutting limbs, you would cut a lot more limbs than just 33 or 34 like we cut. These were those 9.5 and 10 inch Florida wet oak logs or log. So it did a great job in cutting. As far as speed, it did very well in that as well. For a DIY homeowner saw, I think this did very exceptional, being that it's a battery powered saw. Now, do you want something faster? Well, if you're wanting a true farm and ranch saw, or you're really wanting to step up in a class, then reach for its cousin, the Ego. It's going to be a lot faster saw, but you're going to spend quite a bit more money for that as well. At $300, it's really hard to beat this saw, especially being all in with it coming with the 6 amp hour battery as well as the charger. And you get a 5-year warranty. You can find it on Amazon, you can find it at Lowe's, and a couple of other places as well. We'll have a link in the description if you're interested, so you can check it out for yourself. Also keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even TikTok. And if you don't mind, would you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already? And by all means, if you hated our video, well, give us a thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day. Keep smiling.